But yeah, welcome to our January 2021 technical training meeting. I hope that you guys all had enjoyable holidays. I hope that you all got a little bit of a break, um, and I hope that you're all healthy and well. For our meeting today, let me throw the agenda up here. So I've got a couple of training opportunities, a little bit of new business, but the meat of our meeting today, it's going to go a lot like the meeting we did in December. We're going to be going through some of the things that DOE found when they did their technical monitoring. Our meeting today will be specific to the things that they found related to HVAC, so heating and cooling. But before we get into that, let me just go through the training opportunities, the new business stuff I've got listed here. So the first thing I have is just that the School of, it's the U of U, their continuing education. They open up their schedule for 2021. So they are offering one lead inspector class, and then I think they offer a few lead renovators classes. So I think there's one lead inspector, one lead refresher, and then a handful of lead renovator. So if you need that class, make sure that you sign up. I was going to throw this up on the screen really quickly. This is the list that I have. You guys may have more up-to-date information, but based on the information I have, if it's highlighted in red, then your certification may be expiring during the next 12 months. And it would be, I highly recommend that you go take that class in February. So lead inspectors, there's just take a look. Chambers, a couple of guys that aren't with us anymore, Brenna, Jason, Spencer, and Stuart, or not Stuart, just Spencer. So that's, and that, again, this information may be out of date. Lead renovators, same thing. If yours has expired or is expiring in the next 12 months, it's in red. So Jim, Derek Bishop with MAG, these two guys are gone. Seth, Corey, Kyle, Robbie Reed, and Tracy Russell. And then if you're just new to the program and you need that, make sure you get signed up, because this is probably the best, easiest way to go about it. I know there are other companies that offer it, but take note of that URL, get signed up. The class is toward the middle of or end of February, so you'll want to get signed up right away. Any questions on that? All right. The other training opportunity that I listed here is just that there's a National Home Performance Conference coming up in April, and DOE put out a program notice yesterday that basically just said that they're like, if your program would like to spend its TNTA dollars, they support that. So that's a conference. If you feel like it would be beneficial to you or your staff, you can look into that. I think they're doing some in-person stuff or some webinar stuff, whatever works for you. And then always a reminder, any out-of-state travel has to be pre-approved by Brad, so just plan accordingly. And anyway, there's some information about that. Is anybody aware of any other trainings that that this group should know about that are coming up? All right. For the new business part, I've got a little slide for each of these, but I just want to talk about some program award nominations coming up, calculating the energy index, and then mobile home water heater frequently asked questions, and then we'll jump into our main topic. So for the WAP program award nominations, Brad, I don't know if you're on. If you wanted to talk for a minute about this, you're welcome, or I can go through it.
Sixes, yeah, I'm here. last year we ended up, because of the reacting to the COVID and stuff like that, we ended up not having the Train Palooza. And because for some peculiar reason I had stuck in my mind that these awards needed to be tied to that, we didn't offer them last year. And as I was thinking about this the other day on the lovely drive between here and Uinta Basin, it dawned on me that that was probably a big mistake. And so, regardless of whether or not we're able to gather as an entire program this winter, I'm still going to run the awards like we've done in the past. So, as you know, what Matt has here on the screen as a reminder, there's the three awards. There's the Health and Safety Hero Award. Anybody in the program can be nominated for that, and that's a person that has uh, through their work actions, done something that has saved, potentially saved lives or made a significant health and safety impact to either our clients or fellow coworkers. The first award we gave out was Romney. And there was a furnace that they had. I don't know what was it. Romney just showed up. It was like 1,300 parts per million or some crap like that, measurable in the airstream. That thing was a death machine, and the guys were out there doing their job, and so I encourage you to go ahead and start thinking about that one. The second award, named after Gary Spangenberg, some of you still might remember him. The What Were You Thinking Award. That is an agency award, and it's a little bit of fun. You'll see on the slide there on the left, that's our flying jackalope that is a top, sets atop of that award. And that award is just you submitting the most crazy thing you found in the last year in the field. It's we've known, and we always have these great war stories of all these crazy things you guys have seen in the field, and just it's just something to recognize that there's some criteria about how the picture should speak for itself. There's no need to provide a narrative or description, and hopefully, uh, again, you've been saving those pictures. We've all had these moments where we've just seen these things that it made you wonder what in the world they were thinking when they did it. And so we just like to capture those and point those out. The last award is our Mike Johnson Weatherization Innovation Award. And this is an individual award that is for those people that have moved the bar in the program, made some significant contribution that has had a big effect, impact in moving this program in a new direction. And so all these nominations are done through an online form. I'll be sending that out to the people that I have email addresses and stuff for. If you don't end up getting it, talk to your coordinator, because I promise you it will show up in their inbox. And so you can start submitting those things. There are some limitations on the agency award, the What Were You Thinking award. There's only one nomination allowed per agency. So I would strongly encourage the coordinators to be the central person to collect those recommendations from your own staff and submit to us. And then likewise on the other awards as well. Those submissions can be done by anybody in the program. We will seat a committee who will review those. All nominations will come directly to me. I will prepare them, and then the committee will seat and vote on those, and we'll make those awards as we kind of see how things play out. Again, unfortunately, my optimism isn't very high that we'll be able to pull off a full blown training palooza event this year, but we still will probably try to offer some type of a smaller scale event, even if it's virtually, late winter, early spring, and that's when I kind of project that we'll try to do this. It's something the guys and I still need to work out. So, you might have any questions on the weatherization awards? All righty.
All right. Thanks, Brad.
And while I've got everybody's attention, one other thing: there was a notice that went out yesterday afternoon suspending the installation of EC motors using Department of Energy funds. If you have not seen that email or your management has not notified you, we are no longer installing EC motors using DOE funds. You can still use LIHEAP weatherization funds, but you cannot use DOE funds. Hopefully everybody understands that. We will work on rectifying the problem that is creating that need to stop this at this time. But there's been a oversight that was pointed out to us by Department of Energy yesterday, and so we have to fix that.
Any questions on that one from anybody? So the caution there would be if they're a DOE customer, you would not be able to do a ECM motor on their furnace for right now. Otherwise, just make sure you're paying for it with your LIHEAP funds.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So this next slide that I've got up was this was something we discussed in the coordinator meeting. And so a lot of the coordinators should already be aware of it. Hopefully they passed all the information along, but I just realized it wouldn't hurt to talk about it for a minute here in this meeting. And so what it is in our November coordinator meeting, we discussed the client qualification workbook, and Brad put out a new workbook with a few changes made to it. And one of the changes was that it calculates the energy index, which we've been reporting on the BWR. But we had been using the NEAT or the MIA audit to calculate that energy index. And the new client qualification workbook calculates that more accurately. It's actually using that client's real usage. And so it's a better data point than what the NEAT audit can give us. And so we're asking you guys to stop calculating it in the NEAT audit. And if you are not familiar with this, it doesn't affect your audit at all. So auditors, if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. But I suspect an auditor at each agency has been having to go into the energy index. And this was where you went in and you put in the heating degree days and you selected what the primary heating fuel was, and it would give you a number. So all this is that if you have been doing that, you don't need to do that anymore. It would just be a redundant thing. So you can stop calculating the energy index. And whoever has been reporting this on the BWR, you need to make sure that you are now getting that number off of the client qualification workbook. And you can see there's a couple of worksheets in the workbook that will actually have this EI, the energy index, on it. It's going to be, there's one tab called natural gas, and there's one tab called electricity. And you have to determine, like, both of them will say EI on them. You have to look and see what is the primary heating fuel for that house. So if the primary heating fuel for the house is electricity, then you need to pull the EI off of the electricity page. Or if it is natural gas, you need to pull it off of the natural gas page. But you're just taking that number once it's been calculated, and you'll be reporting that on the BWR. And then as a reminder, if the primary heating fuel is a non-metered fuel like wood or propane, then you won't be able to calculate the EI. And so if this field is left blank on your BWR, then down in the comments on the BWR, you need to clarify that the primary heating fuel, was not metered, and that's why you don't have the energy index. So any questions on that? And then Brad, I think you'd mentioned that there was still something wrong with the form on our web page. Has that been fixed, or is that still pending? Was there something wrong with the client?
Follow up on that. Yeah, there was something that wasn't downloading the other day, wasn't there?
Okay, so if you go to our web page and you're not able to get the client qualification workbook, shoot Brad an email and he can send you a copy. Will that work?
That one just downloaded. It was something else the other day I was having problems with. But
Okay.
I don't know. There's a couple
Well,
things we can fix on there
if
anyway.
you're having issues, bring it to our attention. We'll get it fixed. How's that?
Oh,
So
and kind of along, just because we're here right now too, I've had a conversation with a couple of coordinators, but we're going to add the social security numbers back on the crisis. I think there's one of the apps that doesn't have it anymore, and so we're going to put those back on there because the way the new EREP system works for finding heat certificates, the best answer is to have a social security number. Um, the EREP system doesn't filter the clients down by counties you serve like the old seal work. And so when you run a name, you get every person with that last name in the entire state, and it can make it a little bit more complicated. So we're going to go ahead and put that. For those of you that have an application that's been approved by me that's alternate from what the state is, just go ahead and add the social security numbers onto those if you haven't got them on there. I think all the alternate apps I've approved had social security number, but I'll get that. So I'll try to get. There's probably about 2 or 3 things I need to get updated on the webpage here in the next few days, and I'll try to. Now that people are coming back to work after the first year, maybe I can get something done. So
cool. All right. Any other questions on this? Okay. The last thing before we jump into the main topic was just I mentioned in a couple of technical meetings ago. Sorry. We talked briefly about we have a general rule in the program about mobile home water heaters, and after I mentioned that in the meeting, I ended up in like 4 or 5 conversations about it. So I put together uh, just a frequently asked question, and I tried to address all of the questions that I fielded from everybody and write them all down so that I can share them with the whole program so that everybody is on the same page. I'm just going to send this FAQ out with the attendance and everything from today's meeting. So when you get the email from me later this afternoon, this will be attached. You can see on the screen, kind of an idea of what you'll find. It has a question about mobile home water heaters. It has an answer for the weatherization program and the crisis program. And I think if you'll take the time to read through that, it should clear up most of the questions that people have had about that. But and then the only other thing with this is that we going through it, we decided to add one thing to the guidelines. It really doesn't change anything, but in the guidelines we had this general rule that I brought up. It is this is the rule, and we had it in the crisis guidelines. We realized we didn't have it in the weatherization guidelines, so we just added it there in section B8. But this is the general rule. It is just that replacing a water heater solely because it is not HUD approved for mobile homes, or it's not mobile home approved, that is not allowable. We replace water heaters because they're broken or they're not venting properly, but we don't go in and just swap them out just simply because they're not the mobile home approved. I think the best example that Brad was able to give me of this was years ago. An agency went in and they replaced a water heater that was 2 months old, and it was just simply because it was not mobile home approved. It was working fine, it was venting fine, and we don't want to waste money doing that. So please don't ever do that. That's really all this is about. Just make sure you're not doing that. But there's a bunch of little nuances about that, and so I tried to address them in these questions. I would encourage each of you, when you get the email later today, just to read through those questions and make sure you understand what's going on there. So any questions on that before I move on? All right. Okay, so the main topic of today's meeting is that we have committed to DOE as part of our corrective action plan that we would provide some training on some of the things that they had concerns or issues about on our recent technical monitoring. If you weren't with us last month, basically DOE did a technical monitoring of our program a few months ago, and it was just a desk review, so they did not come out to Utah. We just sent them some files. The files that we sent them were actually they were all audits, and we sent them from last year's monitoring. So these were files that I had already monitored, and then we handed them to DOE and they monitored them. So anyway, and this is just kind of a table list of some of the things you can see that, they had a concern, and, whether or not the state concurred or not. We were able to go through and kind of respond to the things that they found. Anyway, in our last meeting, we went through the things that they found concerning ASHRAE. So if you weren't in attendance, I would strongly encourage you to go back and watch that meeting. Make sure you clearly understand what the issues were there around ASHRAE. But today, as part of our corrective action, is that we are going to present what the issues were for your training. So that's what we're doing here today. And before I jump into it, I just kind of want to reiterate what I said last time, and that is that DOE, these were their comments. They said, overall, the energy audits provided were good quality and generally contained excellent amounts of documentation. The photos were generally well lit and clear. Notwithstanding the two findings, there were no major concerns, rather a series of minor errors that did not appear to indicate definitive, obvious pattern between all of the subgrantees' energy audits. So DOE overall was quite happy with what they found here. Yes, they found a couple things they were concerned about, but then they also just pointed out a bunch of minor errors. And so again, I just want to thank you guys for all of your hard work, all the things that you guys do, because you really did make this very easy to defend your files to DOE. It was, on this one in particular, DOE had what they thought were a bunch of issues, and it was very easy for me to go through them and show them that really only a few of them were issues. So thank you guys for all of your hard work. Please continue to do what you've been doing. I hate to focus on the negative, but we are going to focus on the things that they found that were a problem. And the whole purpose of that is just so that we can learn from that, so that we can improve. Because our goal, we know we will never be perfect, but we always want to be working on that continual improvement. So that's why we want to go through this stuff today. Does anybody have any questions on this slide? All right. So what I did last time was I just put the information that DOE took issue with on the screen, and I asked you guys out there to take a look at it and tell me what you think is wrong with it. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing today. So this was their concerns about some files, some information about heating and cooling in the files. So you guys out there, take a look at what's on the screen and then speak up. Tell me what you're seeing. What do you think would have been wrong with this information that's listed here? Anybody seeing any issues?
The efficiency is different on all three of them.
The efficiency is different on all three of them. Yeah. So this part is the screenshot from the information that was put into the audit, and it's listed at 60% efficiency. This is out of the field notes that the auditor took, and they listed the furnace as an 80% efficiency. And then on the combustion analysis, the measured efficiency was 85. So is this a problem? this one was a little tricky as I went through it. Because of what our rules were at the time. So this is what DOE wrote. The heating system efficiency was input at 60 AFUE, but the testing indicates 85 SSE. The data collection form indicates an efficiency of 80. So just exactly what you said. They were concerned about why are all these numbers different. Now, some of you may recall we've talked about this recently, where we have committed to DOE as of, I think it was August of last year, that we will, from August forward, we will use this measured efficiency number in our audits. So make sure that you guys are auditors, that you're doing that. QCIs, make sure when you're double checking that stuff that the auditor is using this number. At the time that this audit was run, we were not under that commitment yet. So it was really not an issue that this number did not match this number. But DOE had concerns because this number didn't match their field notes. And as I looked at that, I thought, well, the auditor probably went to the house and saw that it was an 80% efficient furnace. But when they got back to the office, they probably realized that it was a standing pilot light. And anytime we would run into those, we would downgrade the efficiency to a 60%. The only problem on this one, and anytime I found stuff like that, I was able to turn around and show DOE what our policy was and why the auditors did what they did. But in this case, I did not have a photo of the pre-weatherization furnace or its nameplate in the file at all. So I had no documentation to show DOE that this was in fact a standing pilot light. If I had had the photo, then I wouldn't even be showing you this screen, because then the stuff in the file would have been, well documented and there wouldn't have been questions about it. The other thing that would have really helped, if without the photo, is just some notes saying that the nameplate efficiency was 80%, but we downgraded it to a 60 because it's a standing pilot light. Either way, the downgrading and everything else no longer applies. If you audit a house today, or if you're reviewing a house that was audited, this number right here, the 85.8, should be the same number that is on the field collection form, and it should be the same number that's on the audit. So anyway, so that was that one. Any questions or thoughts on that before I move to the next one? All right, so same thing. Here's the information that was in the file. What do you guys think was the concern that DOE had on this one? Be brave, because I am going to wait for somebody to take a guess.
I can't read the labels very well.
Yeah, I apologize. The photo is a little fuzzy. This one is small enough that I realize you can't read it at all. But this one's probably more key to what the problem was here. Anybody able to see that? So this is one I went and monitored this house, and I did not catch this when I looked at this file. But this one was actually, the mistake that was made here made it so that the client, I think they either got one more measure than they should have got, or they got one less measure than they should have got. It actually affected the recommended measures on it. Anybody see it? So I had to do a quick search on the equipment. Osvaldo, you're going down the right path on your comment. I had to go look up the model number, and this was what as soon as I typed in the model number, this is what came up. So this is a 16 SEER residential heat pump, and the auditor evaluated it as a forced air furnace, not a heat pump. And yeah, Osvaldo's noting that this is an electric unit. You can see from the picture that it is an electric furnace, but that distinction between forced air was what the problem was here. Wade, are you able to give us a quick explanation of why that would matter at all? And I apologize, I'm putting you on the spot here. And maybe Wade's not even with us today.
He logged in. He's there.
Oh yeah, he's here. Anyway, if you are able to speak up.
His computer's here.
Yeah. This is what the DOE wrote. It says, auditor incorrectly input the heating system as an electric furnace. The model number shows that it is a heat pump, and this will seriously affect the outcomes of the audit evaluation and likely invalidate some measures. The auditor used the year of manufacture for the cooling system input of 2017, and then they said this will result in an incorrect evaluation. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but first let's talk about this. So, and Wade said he's having some audio issues. So just from the picture, you'll notice the energy guide. This was from a layman. I am really not that great with HVAC, even though I'm licensed to install HVAC in the state of Utah, because the bar is so high. This was my biggest clue right here. Was on the energy guide, it shows a efficiency rating for the cooling and also for the heating. So that was my first clue to point out that this is not just an air conditioning unit, it also is for heating. And then just looking at the configuration of the furnace inside the home helped me to start to wrap my mind around it a little bit still, but I still wasn't sure because I'm not that great about it. And so what I'm asking auditors to do is, if you do not know what the equipment is, you got to go back to the office and do some research. You're going to have to educate yourself on what it is. Take the time to look up the model numbers and start to read and figure out what that equipment is. Make sure that you're clearly identifying it on the audit. I reran this audit based on DOE's what they found, and they were correct. When I corrected this audit, it decreased the number of recommended measures. So this house actually had a measure that got installed that should not have been installed. And this is a problem because if DOE wanted to, they could come back and disallow costs on this job. It doesn't seem like that's the avenue they're going to go down at this time, which is nice, but that's why this is so important. Is just that if we get this wrong, it can mess up our heating and cooling loads or the amount of savings that is there, and it can affect the things that are on the recommended measures list.
Can you hear me now, Turner?
I can hear you now.
All right.
You got, and you probably haven't heard much of what I've said because you've been
No, I
trying to
heard
get
everything
logged
you
in.
said.
But okay, cool. Anything to add to this one, Wade?
No, I think you nailed it there. Just, like he said, this is an actual air handler. It may or may not have electric strip heat in it as backup. So they have a heat pump, and you can see the line set going to the coil here. And this may just be a blower motor and nothing else. May or may not have electric heat strips in it to use as backup. Most of the time they do, but sometimes they don't. So again, like Turner said, you need to look this information up and make sure you know what you're dealing with. So.
Cool. And then yeah, DOE had pointed out that instead of using the SEER rating, they had used the manufacturer or the year of manufacture. That is okay. We actually took issue with this part of the comment that DOE had said, because we basically they stated here that this could result in incorrect, or will result in incorrect evaluation when using any date newer than 2008. We just asked DOE if that is in fact the case, that if they would provide that to us, some documentation on that, so that we will know. But for the time being, our audit has been approved, and the way the audit runs is if you don't put in the SEER and you just put in the year of manufacture, it will estimate what the SEER rating is. But all of that aside, I'm still uncomfortable with the auditor putting in the 2017 here, because they clearly had the SEER rating available to them. It was somewhere between a 14 and a 17, and if you look at the model number and do a little bit of research, you can quickly find that it is a 16 SEER unit. So,
hey Matt, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so if that does have a heat strip in it, then do we enter the heat pump as the heating, or do we enter it as forced air electric?
Great question. The preference is going to be to what's it going to be doing most of the time, and which, because if I'm not mistaken, the heat strip's going to kick in when it can't draw enough heat from outside. Is that right?
Correct.
So I would assume that under most conditions, it's going to be drawing heat from outside, and then every once in a while, it's going to kick on the electric heat. So it's probably more accurate to list that as the heat pump instead of a forced air, furnace.
Hey,
And
Turner, does my mic sound better now?
that is better. What you got some input on that one, Wadro?
Yeah, just exactly what you said is spot on. The heat pump is going to be doing the bulk of the heating. Probably somewhere around 80 to 90% of the heating will be performed by the heat pump, and the heat strips are simply supplemental. If they're set up right, they'll be doing very little of the heating or contributing to the heating.
Yeah. And if you get into a situation where you're questioning that, and you're feeling like this, this particular heater is actually the heat strips are on all the time, if you've got some way to show that, just put it in your notes. Like if you're making a decision a certain way, just make sure you're commenting about that and documenting why you're making that decision. And that kind of stuff will help clear up any of the questions that anybody has that's reviewing this file. So, and then, if you're still concerned and perplexed, call Wade. He's installed a few of these, I heard. And I think he knows a few things.
That's what I'm here for, guys. Give me a call if you have any questions.
We're happy to help. So, and call Wade, call me if you're concerned about how to document something on the audit. We really want to be able to be here and help you. So anyway, so that was this one. Best practice would be if you can identify the SEER rating, please use the SEER rating and not the year manufactured, because that's going to be more accurate. But that's it. So any other questions on this one? Okay. Here is the next one. And I apologize, I must have pushed the button twice so you can see what the problem was. So, and it's pretty obvious. So this one, they listed it as an evaporative cooler. This was the only photo in the file. So I can look at it and take an educated guess that it's not an evaporative cooler, but I'm still not 100% because I didn't have a photo of the unit from the outside of the house or anything like that. But DOE's comments were the same assumption that I would make. The audit photos show the house had a window AC, but it was entered as an evaporative cooler. So just a great reminder to make sure, like, take the photo of the unit from the outside and the inside. And if it is an AC unit, most of them have right on the side, on one of the sides, you can usually snap a photo of the efficiency of the unit, especially if it's a newer one. So those photo from inside and outside, or just a photo of from here and then the efficiency of the unit, would have really helped clarify the documentation here, and then make sure that you are accurately identifying the equipment. So how about this one? Anybody want to venture a guess as to what the concern was on this one? So this is a mobile home audit. So the information out of the audit report looks a little different than the NEAT, but as you can see, under the primary cooling, the auditor entered no data. And there were no notes on the field collection form. There was nothing in the notes saying whether there was an air conditioner or a swamp cooler or anything like that. But in the auditor's photos, there was this picture of the house that was labeled as north side of home. And then, sorry, this picture's on its side, but you can see that the auditor actually labeled this as a dirty window beneath a swamp cooler. So if there had been some notes saying that the swamp cooler was not working or anything like that, then that would have justified, nothing listed here. But based on this photo, this is what DOE had to say about it. Says the home has an evaporative cooler on the roof, but no performance data is input into the audits for replacement evaluation. And then this was one of the few items that I had actually identified on our state monitoring. I have to take some ownership here, guys. On the HVAC, on these heating and cooling things that DOE found, I did a terrible job identifying them on my monitoring. And so this finding is on my shoulders. And I apologize to you guys. But what that means is I will be watching this very, very closely going forward. And I need you guys to do the same thing. If you're an auditor, I need you to make sure you're being very accurate with these inputs. If you're a QCI, I need you to make sure you're double checking this stuff and making sure that the auditors haven't overlooked something. But when I come out on my state monitoring, I will be looking very closely at your efficiencies and at the equipment that you've put in, making sure that we're putting the right stuff in so that we don't miss this one again. But any questions on this one? All right. How about this one? Anybody see any issues here?
Looks like the square foot's different.
You are correct, sir. Thanks, Isaac.
Significantly.
Now, is it okay for the square footage to be different when you're talking about an air conditioner or a cooler? It can be. It's okay in some situations. If you go into a home and they have a small air conditioner in a window and you can tell that they're only cooling that one big room that they're in, it's all right for you to evaluate that at, you know, as something less than the whole house. Or if you've had a conversation with the client and you know, from that conversation you've derived that information. But based on what DOE noted here, I would highly recommend that if you ever do have a square footage that's smaller, that you explain why in the comments. And I would rather that you take the time to do that and be as accurate as possible on your audit about how much area they're cooling, versus just, you know, throwing the whole square footage of the house on there. But in this case, having been in this home, and knowing that this was a swamp cooler, and knowing the configuration of this home, it would have been very, very hard to make that argument here. And if I could have made that argument, it still would have been cooling more than half of the house, more than 1,200 square feet. So this one is clearly just that the auditor accidentally put the 1 in front of the 2 here. The square footage on this house was 2128, and they just keyed it in wrong. And I did not notice it when I went through the file. So it's something, it's an easy mistake to make, and it's an easy mistake to not catch after it's been made. So question about using the specs on the cooling system that indicate how many square feet that it is capable of cooling. I would say let's not do that. I think that would cause too much confusion. I guess if you really felt strongly on a case by case and had some great justification, but yeah, just what Brad is saying. I think you're going to want to put in the actual square footage that it's cooling on the home. That is what we're trying to evaluate there. So, but great question. Thank you for asking it. But yeah, so they just said cooling area entered was incorrect. So keep an eye on that. Make sure these numbers match, or if they don't match, that you have some documented reason why. But that's going to be the exception, not the rule. So, all right, how about this one? Anybody see any issues with this one? Anybody seeing any concerns there? What would DOE have issues with? So somebody who's logged in as energy auditor said the SEER is wrong.
That's Zach.
Okay. What do you mean, Zach?
He's got the SEER. That's what he's talking about. Input at 14, data label at 13.
Yeah, so that one's pretty obvious. It jumps right out at me that these two numbers don't match. Anybody notice anything else? Any HVAC guys out there?
The capacity is probably wrong.
Why would you say that?
Capacity.
What's your heartburn over the capacity?
It looks like from the model number, it's a 2.5 ton, and they've got it in as 75,000 BTUs.
So if it's a 2.5 ton, how much capacity in kBTUs would that be?
30.
Yeah. So that is correct, and I want to talk about that for actually I may have some slides after the next one. We'll talk about that in detail. But yeah, DOE said. Thanks for your comments, Romney. This job shows the condensing unit is a Goodman model, blah, 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 and it indicates it's a 13 SEER and a 30,000 BTU cooling capacity. However, it was modeled as a 14 with a 75,000 capacity. So the Energy Guide sticker in the photo of the unit confirms that it's a 13. And I went back and reran this audit, and correcting this on the audit added one more window that should have been replaced on this home. So this was a case where by getting this cooling wrong, we shorted the client of a measure that they were eligible to receive. So it can move the needle a little bit. Please be careful on that. We'll talk a little bit more about how to calculate or figure out your capacity in just a minute, but let's look at, oh, and we'll talk more about this too, but as Kyle just mentioned, he's looking at the model number and he's saying this looks like a 2.5 ton. And I'll just jump into it here for a minute. Basically, I think most of you that are auditors have been in my one-on-one class, and we talk about this briefly, but we don't really practice it very much in the class. And I need you guys to practice it on your own. If you come across something and you are not sure what the capacity is, you've got to go find it. You have to go look it up. If it's an older unit, it should be in the Preston guide. If it's like 2005 or older, if it's newer, you should be able to find it somewhere on the internet. This one took me a couple of minutes, but I just simply searched for the model number and the word Goodman, and I was quickly able to find the manual for the unit. And in the manual, and I was able to download the manual for free. It showed me the product identification, and it showed me this table, so I could figure out what these numbers mean. And as you can see here, so it's just showing what the first digit in the model number means. And so it says the first digit, if it's a V, that means it's a Goodman value line. And then the second digit is going to tell us the product family, and there's only one option here. It's an S or a split system, so that that matches there. The third digit is going to tell us the product type, and it's either going to be, in this case, a condenser or a heat pump. Since this is an X, we know it's a condenser. The fourth, the next two digits are going to be the SEER rating. So as we can see from the model number here, this is a 13 SEER. And then the next digits, and it looks like 2 digits, but as you go down, it's actually the next 3 digits you can see in their table. The next 3 digits are going to tell us the capacity. And that's the 030. So we can see from the capacity, the 030, that is 2.5 tons, just exactly what Kyle was guessing. And the 030 looks like it represents the kBTUs. It's the 30,000 kBTUs, so, or 30,000 BTUs, sorry. But if you don't know what the capacity is or the SEER rating is, you've got to go digging on that model number and figure it out. Is really the moral of the story here. So, any questions on that? I think we've got a couple of slides, and Wade will give us any other advice there in just a minute. But let's look. I think this is the last one, so let's take a look at this, and then we'll kind of jump back to the identifying the model number stuff for a minute. Anybody see any issues on this one? Anybody notice a problem here? Brandon says it's a 1974. It needs a tune-up, huh? Yeah, Sawyer says the wrong SEER was entered. Yeah, so
and the capacity.
And the capacity. Yeah, so and that's exactly what, so DOE said the cooling system input is as a 100 SEER Anybody seen a 100 SEER air conditioner? And 4,000 BTUs, which is impossible and seems like an error. The data collection form indicates a 10 SEER and a 36,000 BTU. And that's, yeah, so they indicated here that it's a 10 SEER. Be careful, because I want to say this was a MIA audit, and the way that you enter the stuff on the MIA audit, it says the efficiency, and then it says the efficiency units. So you're identifying that this is the SEER, and so 100 SEER is not possible, or at least I'm not aware of any of them. So it's pretty obvious that they accidentally just added a 0 there. And then the capacity, I don't know. I'm not sure where that came from. My guess is that the auditor may not have understood how to identify that or how to figure that out. So with that, oh, here's a summary of what we found. So DOE found, need to take that thing out and shoot it, Brad says. We found a significant amount of errors. DOE found a significant amount of errors on the inputs of the heating and cooling systems. And then this is what the state found. DOE asked us to go through all of them and kind of comment on them. So the state investigation found furnace and AC inputs were incorrect or did not match the field collection photos on 8 jobs. The state found that DOE's assessment to be correct on 8 of the 19 issues they identified. So DOE they found 19, we whittled it down to 8. 2 were heating, 6 were cooling. Only 1 of the 8 issues was identified during the state monitoring process. So I will be doing a much better job of identifying this kind of stuff. And then the summary of the issues was the furnace SSE was incorrect on 1 job. The heater and AC were entered as a forced air instead of a heat pump on 1 job. We incorrectly identified a window AC on 1 job. No cooling equipment entered where an evaporative cooler existed on 1 job. Cooling area, square footage, keyed in wrong on 1 job. And then the SEER rating errors on 2 jobs. So kind of a broad mixture of errors, but all of them relating to heating and cooling, and all of them have an effect on our recommended measures, because the savings that's calculated from everything but our base loads comes from our heating and cooling inputs. So if we get them wrong, we get the job wrong. So Wade added a couple of slides here. Do you have some knowledge that you could add to what I've already said about how you would go about identifying model numbers? Any good recommendations on where to look and what to do?
So can you hear me okay now still?
Yes.
Okay. So Matt pretty well covered it, but just a quick Google search. And so one of the units in question that we just saw, I simply typed in the model number and specs, and it will pull up, PDF, you can download the whole install manual. Another PDF, you can download all the service instructions. So it's real easy for newer units to just do a Google search, and it will bring up whatever you need, and you can download these PDFs, and it'll spell out what each of these numbers and letters means, everything that Turner has covered. And so again, this just took me typing that in and pushing enter, and bam, there's all the information I need right there. So just, a reminder, the information's out there. It's not hard to find, especially on newer units.
Cool. And then anything to add here? Whoops, on this one, it's kind of the same screen with just the way to identify the number.
Same thing. You can find this stuff online, and I've been doing it forever, so to me it comes natural. I can look at it. Even guys like Kyle and Richard and stuff. When you've been looking at these numbers forever, you start to learn that the manufacturers, you figure out where they're telling you, like the 16 and the 024. So that's the SEER and the capacity. And that's just something that comes with time and looking at lots of model numbers. So again, if you're new to this and you haven't spent a lot of time looking at these model numbers and interpreting them, just go do a little bit of research. All the information's out there. Again, Google and the Preston Guide are great resources.
Barbara asked if this is something they should print and put in their files. It really is not a bad idea. If your auditors were just to snap a photo of once they actually find the right number, they're welcome to do that. Be careful with that though, because I feel like sometimes when we are over documenting stuff, we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit. So just when I was going through trying to find the right product identification, I thought I had found the right table, and I got to like the 4th digit before I realized I was looking at the wrong table. So yes, if you know you found the right table and you want to include that in your file, that there's not a problem with that. It's a great way to document that you've done your job. So. And then this was just the other piece of information that I found as I was digging around. I hit the internet because I wanted to know what in the world a ton is. And I found a mixed bag of explanations. Whether this one is true or not, this helped me to wrap my mind around it. So one of the websites I found said that back in the day, they measured or they would identify units by a ton, meaning it was the amount of energy needed to melt or freeze 1 ton of ice over 24 hours. And a machine that could freeze 1 ton of ice over 24 hours was called a 1-ton unit. So kind of like horsepower, they figured out some way to measure the amount of energy that was going into something, and they called it a ton. So if that helps you guys to kind of remember that, or identify how that works, that may be where the ton came from. And then we use tons and BTUs when we're looking at these units. So BTU is the amount of heat needed to raise 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. And so 1 ton is equal to 12,000 BTUs. And that's linear. So 1 ton equals 12,000 BTUs. So 2 tons equals 24,000 BTUs. 1.5 tons equals 18,000 BTUs. So if you can remember that 1 ton is 12,000 BTUs, if they list the BTUs on the nameplate somewhere, then you can convert that to tons if you're needing to report on the tonnage, or vice versa. If the model number shows how many tons it is, you should be able to convert that to BTUs pretty easily. Any other advice from Wade or any of the other HVAC guys out there? It looks like Spencer Nelson posted in the chat a link to the buildingcenter.org. Spencer, does that have some good info on the equipment model numbers and stuff there? Is that what that's about? Or any other advice from anybody else? Preston's Guide, I feel like I rarely find what I need in the Preston's Guide, because I feel like we're dealing with stuff that's newer than 2005. Does anybody have any comments there, or any other advice on that?
Again, it's another resource. It does deal with older equipment. They do have it online now, so you can just subscribe to it online, which is a heck of a lot easier than searching through their book. So again, just another resource, but it is all older equipment, 2005 and older. So just keep that in mind.
Well, I've got a book on my desk that I use. I don't anyway, but I do. I find stuff less and less in there. So but it is a good resource. Yeah, Spencer replied and said that the building-center.org has some HVAC and water heater serial numbers, so that may be a good resource as well. Last thing I wanted to talk about just really quickly before we end is just this. So we pointed out some errors and some mistakes on some audits, and unfortunately we use humans to run audits, and we use humans to check our audits, and as humans we all make mistakes. We're going to overlook some of these errors, but our goal is to just improve. So making sure that somebody is double checking the audits is going to be key on this. But this is kind of a short list of what we're asking you guys to make sure that you guys are doing. Auditors, make sure you're doing this. QCIs, make sure you're doing this. Coordinators and leaders, make sure this stuff's happening at your agency. So auditors, you just a reminder to be more thorough and accurate. If you've been sloppy before, just be better. Be as accurate as you possibly can. QCIs, identify errors. You've got to review the audits and identify them. If you saw something today that is not on your checklist, add it to your checklist. Make sure that you're keeping your checklist up to date. You're using a good checklist. When you are checking these audits, put yourself in an environment where you won't be distracted, where you can actually do a good, thorough review of the audit. You know, find the right time of day, find the right location, make sure you're doing good reviews. And then the other thing that's really important is make sure that there's a good communication loop going on. QCIs, if you're finding stuff, you got to inform the auditors, let them know, educate them, help them to improve and correct these errors. So anyway, thank you guys for all that you're doing. Does anybody have any other questions or comments on what we've been talking about today before we end? All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for your comments in the chat and also for speaking up and being involved today. And yeah, just stay safe out there and keep doing that great weatherization work that you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Turner.
Thanks.